Okay, there we go. All right, so what is this, the fourth session, I think, or fifth? I don't even remember anymore what session we're on. See, it looks like maybe we're in the fifth session of the orientation sessions. So today we're going to talk about enrollment and reporting, and then also I want to talk about evaluating for impact. So yeah, thanks, Sharon. Yeah, it is the fifth one. So we're going to talk about the 4-H online. I'm not going to give like the specifics on 4-H online but what do you report where through that system? And then also we're going to talk about evaluating. And so this would be not necessarily through the common measures evaluations, but this would be if you want to do evaluations of some of your programs. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to make sure. Okay. Do you guys see the enrollment and reporting screen? I need to get my chat box up too. I don't know where it went. Okay, I lost. Oh, here. Sorry, I'm trying to find the chat. It's like hidden on my computer. Oh, there we go. Okay, good. Okay, you can see, okay. I'm glad you guys can see that because some days it doesn't work. Okay, still see it? Okay. Okay, good. All right, so when we talk about enrollment and reporting, so this is, to me, this kind of shows, we're going to talk about the ES 237, which is our federal report, and then how that relates to 4-H Online. So 4-H Online is, as most of you know, is our enrollment management system. And so from that, we get our enrollment numbers of youth and adults that are in clubs and groups. That's where we get our project enrollment numbers. There's a way that you can do achievements and event participation through 4-H Online. You can put in trainings, and then again, that's where we get our ES 237. And I want to talk briefly about what is the ES 237. So I know Sharon is very familiar with the ES 237. Liz probably haven't really, you know, maybe you've heard the term, but it is, and then Kenny, you probably have heard me say the term. But what that is essentially, it's kind of our census count of all youth and adults that are participating in extension-sponsored significant educational experiences. So realistically, it is for extension youth programs. And this is where we run into issues because everybody always calls it the 4-H ES 237. It is really not the 4-H ES 237, it's just the ES 237. And all youth that participate in extension programs should be counted into our ES 237. That includes any of our health and nutrition, so any SNAP Ed programs, any FNET programs, any youth horticulture programs, range camp. I'm trying to think of some of our programs that aren't necessarily labeled 4-H, but are youth programs. And that is any youth that is 5 to 19 within our age range. So, and then any adults who work with those youth programs or who attend trainings around youth development topics should be reported in 4-H Online. Now, the way we do that is, different for different programs. So who should be reporting this youth participation? While 4-H Online is the 4-H Online enrollment management system, and it helps us keep track of our 4-H members, it's also designed to keep track of all extension youth programs. So again, if you've got junior master gardeners or any kind of youth horticulture program, if you've got school programs, range camp, there's not a lot of, I don't know if even bootstraps, if there's even any programs still going in bootstraps, but in Project Magic, I don't know if we have any programs that are going on in Project Magic, but I know we do, but I think those have actually, I don't even know if those have been turned over to other agencies. So we really, that's a little bit tougher, but again, it's any youth. Probably, I'm guessing, Liz, you may have a couple, but not, and I'm like maybe some of the programs that Marilyn Smith had been doing that are continuing, through whatever. Sharon, like your Ag in the Classroom is one, sometimes those have been counted, sometimes I know you count those, but this really comes into play in places like Clark County, Washoe County, where they do have youth horticulture programs, or they have FNEP and SNAP-Ed. And as our FNEP and SNAP-Ed are expanding, then that may come into play in some of the other counties as well. So how do you report those? So there's the individual reporting or individual enrollment. Those are where you get the detailed individual demographic data. So that includes name, address, all of that information. It's also required for all of our 4-H members and our direct volunteers. So any of our 4-H youth that are in the club program need to be individually enrolled. We also have our group enrollments, which is really the aggregated demographic and that subject matter data that we're getting from any youth programs. I know, like Sharon, with your with Ag in the Classroom, you do a group enrollment for that, and that's exactly the way it should be used. Camps, overnight camping is a group enrollment. What you can do is, if those are 4-H members as well, you put them in as duplicates. And I'm gonna show the group enrollment form so that everybody can see that and know how to do that. But essentially, you put them in as duplicates if they're already counted in our system. But it's not. You can also add like 4-H camp into the youth's individual record if they are a 4-H member. And what you would do is that's where you go into the events or the activities tab on their on the enrollment process through 4-H Online, and you can add that in as one of those activities or events. That way it shows that they went to camp, but it's not, and I had to remind some staff the other day that overnight camp is not a project, it is a delivery mode, and you can, or an event or activity, but it is not a project. So so is there any questions about that, about, and I'm going to talk about when you would use individual versus group enrollments. But do you guys have any questions about how you enroll those? Or what needs to be enrolled? Okay. So on delivery modes. So these are all of the delivery modes. Now I'm going to preface this by learn these, but in a couple of years they may change. There is a committee at the national level that is looking at delivery modes, and do we need to have all of these delivery modes? I personally think, I need to know how many we have in overnight camping programs, how many we have in day camping programs, how many we have in school-based. The other piece, these are pretty antiquated wording on these. I've been trying to move towards using club-based programming, special interest-based programming, camping-based programming, school-based programming, after-school-based programming, rather than these terms. And so I was just thinking about it this morning as I was going through, or today when I was going through this PowerPoint, just to remind myself what I needed to teach or what I needed to talk about today. I've got a couple of documents that I need to pull together into one document. I pulled them from other states and have been using them, but I think it would be beneficial to us to use that, or to pull it into one for us to use. So when we talk about the club delivery or the club-based programming, in 4-H Online, or in the ES 237 report, it shows it breaks it down into different groups. So what this is you have the organized 4-H club, and that is an organized group of youth that are led by an adult for a planned program that's carried out for a certain amount of time. Here it says throughout all or most of the year, and as many of you know, we've been starting to have those conversations of, does it have to be a year-round program? And so with that, and this is where one thing might change. They may add a category called a spin club, or however they phrase that, kind of that short-term club experience. But within that, there are 4 different categories. And so I think it's really important to know what those categories are. The community club, which is, it's a club that's chartered through the county extension office or through the state 4-H office. This is where, we're also trying to look at this definition, but they should have at least 5 members and follow kind of that national definition at this point. This is also because we have, like, Elko has community clubs, but we have a lot of counties, like Douglas County has project clubs. And so project and family clubs are entered into that community club definition. And then the in-school clubs are technically, those do not, well, they didn't apply to Nevada until this last year. And we do have one county that has gotten 4-H clubs started within the schools in that county. So Clark County has, I think, one school district at least, or one school, sorry, not school district, one elementary school that all 4th graders are in. Each classroom in the 4th grade is a club, and they do business meetings, they have officers, they do projects, they do everything that a club does. They do it during the school day. I think it's once a week or once a month, they meet during, all of the leadership of that club meets during lunch and has has a meeting, and then they do business meetings once a month in their classroom during that time. So we do have that, but typically that is a Southern model, a Southern United States model, where the extension 4-H professional, they're extension agents down there. They go into the school and conduct those club meetings. In our case in Vegas, we actually have a volunteer the teacher is the volunteer. But again, you don't use that. If you're just going into the classroom and teaching something, then that's another category. This is only if they follow the club model. We do have some after-school clubs. And so this is not where you go in and teach in an after-school setting. So like Sharon, when you go in and teach in the after-school setting, unless they are having those officers and having business meetings, those types of things, then you don't, then that's where they would be counted here. Again, we're looking at that. We wrote a grant to try to bring that into FNEP and SNAP-Ed programming in Clark County, to where we would bring in the 4-H club model into an after-school setting in those schools that they were doing the SNAP-Ed and FNEP. and it's something that I want to bring statewide. It's, you know, for anybody doing that, but you know, at this point, you know, that's where that kind of group would be counted. And then we also have clubs on our military bases. Again, probably the only two counties that might be affected by that would be Clark County with Nellis Air Force Base, Churchill County. They do have 4-H clubs with their with the naval base there, and then also any National Guard groups. I think Washoe County did at one time have some military clubs within their National Guard program. So, but if you're just going and doing programming again for the military base, then that would be different. So any questions on the club? Does everybody understand where how you would put, and these are individual members. You would put in groups here, you would put in individual members here. Supposedly there's a way that we can do it via group enrollment, but I have never figured that out. So, okay, special interest in short-term groups. So this is this is kind of the catch-all category for a lot of the things that we do. It would involve a variety of youth development activities and events that involve direct teaching by the extension professional or even our trained volunteers. But it is not, what I did find last year was I had a county put a bunch of numbers in here when they were going to a classroom or going to a school, and they were sharing information about 4-H and maybe showing them projects that were available in 4-H. But there was really no education. It was a marketing event. And that's the difference. You do not put, marketing events do not count. So if you're just going to a local community, you know, a community fair or whatever, and you just have those, you know, you just have a booth set up where you share pamphlets, etc. Don't count those numbers. Last weekend, my son's own club had they had the shooting sports trailer set up in Virginia City at their Children's Day at the park. That would be an educational event. Technically, we say it should have at least 6 hours of education. I do tend to be a little bit more lenient on that. I want it to have an educational component. I don't want it to be, you know, just go in and talk about 4-H. So also any multi-day meetings or conferences on a college campus. This would be where 4-H Day at the legislature. So Liz, for your 4-H Day at the legislature, what you would do is take your, if you had 8 kids or 10 kids, you would take those, you would do a group enrollment. They would be put into this special interest category. Now, all of those are also club members, so you would put them in as a duplicate, but at least it would show up there. And it would be in whatever project area that was, and I can't remember exactly what project area, but there's a civic engagement, there's a some category for that. It could be just general civic engagement too. You know, and then when you bring your youth to campus too, you would count those in there as well, because you're bringing them to this program. Any of the, you know, Sharon, Liz, both of you, you know, with the teen retreat, this would be again another example of where you would put a special interest or short term. Okay, and they would be duplicates. Okay, any questions on special interest or short term? So other examples of this would be a 4-H Friday or activity day that's held twice a month at the local library, maybe, where they're doing different activities. There is gardening classes. You know, I know our 4-H or, you know, with the youth hort, that could go in, you know, if they're just doing Saturday, and I know like in Clark County, they do Saturday youth hort programs, you know, maybe 6 weeks every Saturday. And that would be where you would put this, where you would put those numbers. Okay, camp deliver. So the camping delivery mode, this is broke down into 2 categories. It's broke down into overnight camping and day camping. So overnight camping, I mean, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. You know, it's where they're gone away, where they're away from home, they spend the night somewhere, at least one night. So when your kids go to 4-H camp, this is where you would put it. If they go to range camp, this is where it would go. And so you just, and this is where I've been running into issues is I don't, you know, this is where I go to find out how many kids we had that participated in 4-H camping last year. Well, our numbers are not even close to where they should be, because I know we had more kids than what are showing up in that category, because everybody keeps trying to put them into a camping project. Again, they would be duplicates. So what it does is on the final report, it tells us, okay, this is how many kids we reached in total, and then this is how many actual bodies that we reached. So if we reach them multiple ways, then it shows in this number, but then it also tells us these are the actual number of bodies. And it's that duplicate is how you define that. And then day camps. So this would be if you're doing theme-based camps. Typically, it may consist of multiple day programs, but it also might be just a one-day day camp. So, but your youth are returning home each evening. So an example of that, in my previous experience, we had a lot of counties that would do spring break camps. So each day of spring break, they would have a different theme, or even I had one county one time that did, during spring break, they did 10, or they probably did 8 different day camps. So Monday afternoon they would have sewing, and on Tuesday morning they would have cooking, and on Tuesday afternoon they would have archery, and on Wednesday morning they would have leathercraft, and on Wednesday afternoon they would have air rifle, except, you know, so each day was a different theme. From that, so then that would be under the day camps. So, you know, I think that there are, you know, and we have a lot of people that do them in the summer. It can be a one-day day camp. I've also seen like where you have lamb camp. It's just a one day, or maybe it's a 3-day, but they go, you know, it's not an overnight where they spend the night. So Lacey, in Northeast Clark County, this last year, they did the overnight livestock camp. They were not at a camp setting. They were at their fairgrounds, but that would be considered an overnight camping event. And so, and what you do is just put in you know, you would just put in that's livestock. And so we would know that, you know, that number went to livestock overnight camp. But some counties have been doing, you know, like a 3-hour educational event on, you know, horse judging. That would, you know, probably be considered a day camp. Could also be a special interest. Okay. You guys have any questions so far? Are you guys awake? Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that. And then we go into school enrichment programs, or I call this school-based programs. So this would be where you go, where you or a volunteer, because sometimes we do have volunteers, either a staff or a volunteer go into a classroom. So this would be where you're doing a sequence of learning activities during school hours. It could also be a you know, where you go in for, you know, you'd want it more than about a half an hour. You would want about, you know, at least an hour or so that you go in and do programming in a school. It can be taking place, at a public school, at a private school, in a homeschool association. I know some of our counties, all the homeschool association will do programming, like they may have the 4-H staff person do, a series of lessons, and everybody that is homeschooled in that community or belongs to that homeschool association comes to the office or comes to one central location, and then our volunteers or our staff present on those topics. This is typically where your FNAP and your SNAP Ed programs are going to go as well, because they typically go into a classroom and do direct education in the classroom. If they're going into an after-school setting, then you would put it in that category, but most traditionally it's in this category. And then you have individual study, mentoring, or family learning. So this is one we don't have. I don't even know if we have anybody, maybe a few people enrolled. But this is where you have a single child doing a project or an activity where they're working independently and they're not part of a club. And so this is one I do not highly encourage us. Some states have actually eliminated individual membership, but they have to be a member of a club. I have not done that because I know that, when you've got kids that are living 100 miles from town, it's kind of hard to make it in for all the club meetings. So we do still offer this, but as you look at the research around the club model and why it is so successful and has been around for so long, it's because it's that social interaction. The young people need to get it. This is the case of a kid wants to take a project. A lot of times they want to take a project to the fair and make money. So, but again, it's not highly encouraged. And then you have your after-school based programming, or they call it school-age childcare. That is a very 90s term. It really is after school. So this is where educational programs are offered to youth outside of school hours, but typically are in a school setting or a community center. It could be in a housing development. But the primary purpose, and you're incorporating 4-H curricula. So an example of this would be, I know Carson City does, Jim goes into schools. He works with the 21st Century Learning Centers in that community. And he goes in, twice a week or whatever it is. I don't know. I mean, he goes in all the time because that's his primary focus. But he goes in and teaches science lessons in these after-school settings. I know, Sharon, you've been doing that more and more with some after-school programs where you're going into the classroom or going into an after-school setting, working with the school district in providing education. Now, if you were to be doing that, where you actually had a club and you had them meet and all of those things, but here they're just essentially they're using our 4-H curricula. These are, sometimes they're run by extension, or sometimes it's in partnership with schools, with a community organization or a school. So again, this is pretty much what most of our programs are. And then we have instructional TV or video programs. So this is one, again, I don't think we've had anybody even enrolled in this program, in this delivery mode since I've been here, and it's been a long time. But these are where you do not necessarily have face-to-face instruction. Maybe it's a podcast, or maybe it's web-based learning, or maybe it's online learning. I could see this. I could actually see this maybe becoming more and more popular as we're looking at technology and how can we reach young people. I could see that becoming more popular. So I don't know, but it is, it's there. So I'm going to share, this is the document. I'm going to stop sharing this document. And this is the one so this delivery mode document, I'm going to, sorry, I'm trying to get back to my screen. I'm going to put this together as for Nevada. This one is one I brought with me when I moved, and I like it because it gives good information. Like, it gives a good clear picture, I think, of this. So you've got the examples of the community club. Again, they're chartered. Those are the chartered groups. The in-school clubs, the after-school clubs, and the military clubs. This is also, with the military clubs, it's okay if those clubs do have non-4-H or non-military youth in them, but typically they're found in military installations. So the short-term or special interest programs, so this could be 4-H Fridays. With a lot of the schools, and I've heard that more and more schools in Nevada have been moving to 4-day school weeks. My experience with that is that 4-H has picked up the slack a lot of times on Fridays, where the school district actually allows 4-H to come in on those Fridays and do programming so that the families don't have to find childcare all day for that. So that could be here, or that could also be considered an after-school program, because I know there are some grants out there for those types of things. And then the overnight camping again, and day camping, school enrichment, the school age or the after school, the instructional. There is also a category in and on the group enrollment form, there's the group volunteer training. This is a way that you could actually keep track of your trainings, but really we don't use that either. I know it says it's not typically used, but it's it's not something we use a lot either. So again, I'm going to put that together for, so it is with some examples from Nevada and not just the examples from Idaho. So the other piece I want to share with you guys is, this is on our website, I believe, but it'll also be in the Nevada box files for you guys to look at. But these are the federal definitions when you are inputting information into 4-H Online. How do you report these? So you have, your ethnic classification, and then your racial classifications. The one that I want to briefly talk about is, I don't think it's in here. It's got the definitions of the programs. Oh, it's not. Okay, the residents, I think we're pretty good about that. I mean, people kind of know where they live. Oh, grade, that's where I wanted to. So I noticed the other day that we have way more enrollment numbers in the not in school and post-secondary or post-high school category that we should have. We have more in that category than we do in 9th through 12th grade. So that's why I did ask the question, hey, what are people using to report? What are you guys reporting in that? So we did have, I did have people say that they were using homeschool, they were using anybody that was younger than our age group, etc. So I just want to remind people that if you have, so the post high school category, which is in there, is all 4-H participants who are enrolled in college or technical schools or 2 years, some kind of post-secondary education. So, and we can have, we do have 4-Hers that are, that do, they've started young and they do fit into that. Their birthday just falls, so they have that extra year where they may be in college instead of in high school. So they have that extra year. For those that are not in school, that should only be used for 4-Hers who have graduated from 12th grade, but they're not enrolled in any kind of post-secondary education or continuing education. I believe that there is also a special category, or I'm trying to remember here. Let me look at something really quick. I'm going to look at an ES 237 to remind me what those, oops. Okay. I don't know if you guys can see this, but okay, so it is post-high school, not in school, and special. Are you guys able to see this? Are you guys able to see this ES 237 report? Okay. Okay. Well, and so you can see see those numbers. Those are way too high. I can guarantee you we do not have 3,352 youth that are participating in our 4-H program that have graduated from high school and are in college. I'm not sure what they're using that number for. But again, that is what they're supposed to be used for. The not in school is for those individuals who have graduated from high school but are not enrolled in post-secondary education. The special category, as I was trying, that was what I was trying to remember what it said. That is for, close that current tab. Okay. That is for 4-H participants who may be, who may have some mental disabilities. This wording, again, is a little bit, it's probably pretty dated. Alan Smith retired, gosh, right after my career started, so 25 years ago, probably 23 years ago, maybe a little bit more. But essentially, special category is for those participants who have a mental disability that are older than 19 years old. Now, and we do allow that, especially if they are still enrolled in high school, because sometimes you'll have a 20, 21-year-old that's still enrolled in high school, and they have an IEP, then that's where they would be considered. That would be the category that they would be in. And I know, and what we say is they really should be still enrolled in high school rather than, because one time I had an email asking if a 42-year-old person could still be enrolled in the 4-H program. And I was like, and so and it wasn't from us, it was another state asking that question because they had that come up. And pretty much all of the program leaders in the West had pretty much all said, that's not appropriate. We usually, up to about 25 is where we kind of look at it. But again, so, and then the duplicates and non-duplicates. Okay, so I'm going to close this one. Oops, I'm going to stop sharing it actually, and I'm going to go to, I wanted to share with you guys, while we're on this topic, I want to share with you the group enrollment form. And I think these group enrollment forms should be on the website. If not, they will be in the Nevada box. Hi, Sandy. I see you joined us. Sorry, I'm going to I gotta share my screen now, find that one. So this would be your group enrollment form. So and this just follows exactly what 4-H Online asks you for in your, when you're entering the data. So what's the program name, where was it, the description, the start date, the end date, what year, if it's a club or a group. So you will have to go into 4-H Online when you do a group enrollment. And if you're at the Sunnyside elementary school, then that would be your group name. What is the delivery mode? Was it after school, in school, etc.? The number of units, that would be how many sessions did you teach? When I was in the county, some of you have heard me talk about the Talking with TJ program. You know, it was 6 lessons. So you would put 6, and then, you know, if I went in for 2 hours every time, then it'd be 12 hours, 12 total number of hours. And then projects would be, you know, because you need to have a project category with each one, even with group enrollments. And so you would figure out what that would be. And then it asks you for male, female in your gender distribution, and then again, your number of duplicates. And so, so those are individuals. So one example that I share is I had a county one time that did after school programs. They went in twice a year. They went in the fall and one in the spring. In the fall, they taught art, and in the spring, they taught gardening. So they were only, and it was the same school, you know, I mean, it was, but they were only counting those once. And I said, no, you're teaching them 2 different times, and you're teaching them 2 different subjects. So what they did, what you do with that, in that case, is you put them in the fall. So, you know, they'd be into the art project. And then if, you know, if there's 15 kids in that came in the fall and 10 of them returned in the spring, you would put 10 duplicates in there. So you would put, you know, 15 total, you know, so 7, you know, so say they were all male, 15 male, and 10 of those would be duplicates. So that's where this duplicate number comes. You would put in the resident distribution. So, you know, just, you know, wherever, you know, put that in without your duplicates. And then your grades would be without your duplicates, and the same with your racial distribution and your and then also if you have adult volunteers, so you only put adult volunteers in your group enrollments if they are new volunteers. So things like camp counselor or camp chaperones, if they only go to camp and that's the only thing that they do within the 4-H program, they would go in here. But if they are also, you know, say you've got a volunteer that's a club volunteer, but then they also go into a school program and teach embryology to young people because they like, you know, they love farming and they love poultry, and then they might go and do you know, do a day camp around shooting sports. You would not put them here because they're already included in our group enrollment, or I mean in our individual enrollments. And then again, classifications of adult volunteers, again, these are new volunteers, not our current volunteers. Do you guys know what a direct volunteer versus a what a direct versus an indirect volunteer would be? Okay. Oh, good. Thanks, Cher. I just was trying to figure out what you said in the employee section. Yes, that's where they are. They are on the website under the general extension website under the employees only or employee support site. So essentially a direct volunteer is someone who works directly with youth. An indirect volunteer is somebody who, it wouldn't necessarily be a co-lead or support. It would be more of a support. So an indirect is one that does not necessarily work directly with youth. So an example of that would be our 4-H camp advisor, the state 4-H camp advisory council. they are actually, most of them are actually indirect volunteers. There's a few that are direct volunteers, but a lot of them are indirect volunteers. At one time, they may have been, working directly with kids, but they don't necessarily at that time. So that's how if they if they work with kids, then they're a direct volunteer. If they do not work with kids. So in this case, say, okay, 4-H Day at the legislature. You may have had a volunteer that helped organize that event. This didn't happen with us, but you may have a volunteer that helped, but didn't necessarily attend the event. That's where you would consider an indirect volunteer. And then, so that's the group enrollment form. And if you guys ever have any questions about the group enrollment form, please do not hesitate to just give me a call and ask. I would rather work with people in the beginning on how to get those in correctly than not, honestly. So, all right. Any questions about enrollment and reporting? Okay. All right, so let me share. Okay. All right. I need to pull up my chat box on my other little screen so I got it. There we go. Okay. I just want to make sure I can, and so I want to talk about evaluating for impact. And what I say about this is, we're not talking, I mean, we always, we have our common measures evaluation tools, which most of you are familiar with. I know, Liz, you haven't had a chance to really sit down and probably look at those, but we do have those available. But these are I want to talk about the kinds of questions, when you're doing an evaluation of an event or even a program. I want to share with you some ways to do that. There's some good ways and some not so good ways to do that. So the objectives essentially of this, and this is one of the things that I like to do with what you have to think about before you even, you shouldn't do the evaluation at the end. Your evaluation should actually be created in the beginning of your program, before you even do the program. What you need to do is really sit down and think about what are your objectives of that event or of that program, and what are the outcomes that you want to see, and you build your evaluation around that. So essentially, at the end of this presentation, the participants are going to be able to state why evaluation of programs is critical to you and the county and your county program. You're going to know what Kirkpatrick's 4 levels of evaluation are, and you're going to use some of the guidelines for developing evaluation tools. Okay, so why do we evaluate? Well, we evaluate to determine the effectiveness of the program design. So how was the program received by the participants, how the learners fared on the assessment of their learning, and determine if the instructional methods worked. So did the presentation mode work? Did the presentation method work? Presentation mode would be, face-to-face versus Zoom versus an online module, those types of things. Did the method work? Did the learning activities work? And what did we achieve our desire? What is the desired level of learning? Do you just want the individuals to gain knowledge in that area, or did you want them to change their practices? We also look at it for program improvement. For those of you, I know Liz was, well, and Sharon's seen lots of evaluations that I've done too. Liz, you got to see the one that we did for 4-H Day at the legislature. And one of the things that we did for that event is we had a separate evaluation tool for the adults versus the youth that attended. And the reason we did that is because we had different we had different questions, and thanks, Sharon. We had different questions. We had different process questions for the adults that we wanted to know versus what we wanted to know from the youth. And so it's important to think about that too. So, and we've looked at that and know what we can make, just in looking at the preliminary results, I know what kind of changes I can make. Should the program be continued? This is another thing. We want to look at, if we've done a program for 15 years and you're getting less and less participation in that event, then it's probably time to look at, should this program be continued? Is it beneficial? And you could do that through an evaluation. How do you justify your existence? You guys have heard me say many times about, I need some of this data for us to use with our stakeholders, and especially with our legislators. And that's exactly, I'm trying to justify our existence. Why should you give us money and not give another group, another youth organization money? And then also determining the return on investment. And this is something we don't get a lot into, probably we'll be looking at in the future, especially if we get any dollars, state and or private dollars, we have to show that return on investment for those stakeholders, both in human capital, in individual competency, and then the social and the economic benefit of the programs. So I think it's probably one of the simplest models, as I have done a lot in research. This is probably the simplest model that I can find for all levels of understanding of evaluation. And it's by Donald Kirkpatrick. And there's 4 levels, and the first 2 levels you do during the program evaluation. So level 1 is reaction. So that's what you're going to typically see, is that reaction. Did you like it? Was it fun? Etc. Level 2, you're going to take those questions and you're going to take it one step further. And what did you learn from that? And then level 3 and 4 are what you would do post-program evaluation. So just an example of kind of thinking about that. So Brian was just in my office this morning or this afternoon, and we were talking about the 4-H Day at the legislature and just civic engagement in general. Well, we did, during 4-H Day at the legislature, we did a program evaluation. We did the levels 1 and 2. We did their reaction, what was the part that you loved the most? And then we did a level 2, and we asked them, who is your state senator? Who is your state assembly person? Did you follow a bill, based on the homework given during the session, during the pre-conference sessions? Did you pick a bill and follow it? And what did you learn about it? And then we were just having a conversation. I said, we need to maybe think about doing a follow-up evaluation in a month or 2 months and find out, how have they used that information that they gained that day? And that would be the behavior or the results. We're not going to get really at a 4, at a level 4, but we could find out if there were behavior changes. So a level 1 reaction, and I'm going to focus most of the time today on level 1 and level 2, because especially for the county people, that's probably the most important to me, that you have a good understanding of what that is, and that way you can you can put together some good evaluations of your programs. So level 1 is reaction. So essentially this is kind of a customer satisfaction. Were they pleased with the program? What's the perception if they learned anything? The likelihood that they're going to apply the content. We don't know if they're going to apply it. They can say, sure, I'm going to apply it. And we can, when you report those results, you can say, 95% of the participants said they were going to use this information beyond, this session. You can find out particular effectiveness of particular strategies, and then also the effectiveness of the packaging of the course or the program itself. One of the questions we ask, when you look at this, one of the questions that we asked the parents on the 4-H day at the legislature was, how do you think you can market this, or how can you, how should we, I can't remember how it was phrased now, how can we better market this program to other individuals, or how, now that you've attended the event, how do you think you can share it? So, I think that, that was kind of getting at that effectiveness in the packaging. So some examples, and, I always think it's important to share examples. So some examples. In a word, how would you describe this workshop? In one word, and that gets you some really cool feedback. So the intent of that is to solicit feedback on the course. If you get boring, tired, just a variety, or if you get exciting, fun, those types of words, then that really, those are the types of things. You can also, the other thing that I find, if you have, so you can also ask them on a Likert scale, or on a scale of 1 to 5. On a scale of 1 to 5, how much did you like this program? 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. I always, in every program I do, I always have at least one person that inverts the scale, and they, because they'll put, you'll say 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. They mark 1, and then underneath, when you say describe in one word, how do you describe this program? Awesome. Well, then you know that they've inverted the scale, and so, or they've transposed the scale. So it gives you that ability to know that. And then again, using a number, how would you describe this program? So it gives you that quantitative feedback, and then you can look at your, then you can look at that. So it gives you a number. Then you can look at the comments. One thing I do want to caution people about is watching your scale sets. And this is something, if you go to do something like this, you can always run an evaluation tool. If you want to practice putting one together, you can always run it by myself. You can run it by Brian. It's good. One of the things that I learned in my graduate program is you should never start with your lowest number and go to your highest number. So technically, like the way this is put together, where it says terrible to outstanding, terrible being the first and outstanding, it should be reversed, and you should always start with your outstanding to terrible. You should start with a positive and end with a negative when you're putting your scales together. But and I forget to do that a lot of times as well. So again, here's some other, how much do you know about this subject before taking the workshop? And then how much do you know about this subject after participating in the workshop? This would be what's called a pre-post reflective. So you're asking them after the program is over, or the workshop is over, how much did they know about what before they came, and how much did they know after they came? Because a lot of times, if you do a true pre-post, you're going to ask them, how much do you know about this? And they're going to say a lot. And then they come to the workshop and learn so much more, but there's nowhere to go on the scale. So they think they know everything they need to know, but then they come and they, find out, no, I really didn't know. That's why the pre-post reflective is almost a little bit better of a model. And then this question does not necessarily assess the actual learning that the participants, but their perceived learning, which I think is fine. It's just when you report it, you have to report it that way. they perceived that they knew a lot, that they knew some about the topic before they came, but when they left, they thought that, or they said that they knew a lot. And then another example, how likely are you to use some or all of the skills taught in this workshop in your work or your community or your family? And again, this determines the learner's perceived relevance of the information. It also, that this question can also a lot of times correlate with the satisfaction that learners feel. If they're super happy with the program, then you're probably going to get a higher number here. And then I think it's always important to ask open-ended questions when doing an evaluation. So the best part of the program was, what's one thing that could be improved most? It's always good to ask them about what was the best part and what could be improved. It really does help you prioritize your work, when you're looking at doing revisions. You can also develop themes, those types of things. One thing that I really want to caution everybody about, and some of you have heard me say this many times, when you're doing an evaluation, don't ask about how the food, especially if you have food and stuff, you don't need to ask about the food. You don't need to ask about the facilities. You don't need to ask about the things that you technically can't control. And you're there, if you know that the facility was awful, an example of that, 4-H Day at the Legislature, I know that the state library got very, very, very warm as the sun rose because of the windows. Did I need to ask the kids that or the adults that? No, because you know what? I was sitting there. I was dying. I was like sweating. And so I know in the future, we need to make an adjustment there. Food. I can see what food was given. Now, granted, we did get some feedback on some labeling of food, like gluten-free stuff, because there was gluten-free food there. It just did not sound like it was labeled correctly by the caterer. I didn't have time to go over there and look at all of that stuff. So sometimes it's, if you get some of that feedback, but you don't need to ask if the food was good. I mean, everybody was eating it. I didn't eat any that morning just because I was too busy, but I'm usually eating the food. I know if it sucked or I know if it's good. And I know if I'm going to, and after the fact, you can't do anything about it anyway. I mean, you're not going to use that caterer again, but you can't do anything to, at that moment. So, so don't ask it those kinds of questions. Try to get through, try to get some of these things about your programs. So some guidelines too for evaluating reaction, decide what you want to find out. What do you want to know? Do you, design a form that will quantify the reactions of the program. Encourage those written comments. Get 100% immediate response. That's the other thing, I felt like it was really important. And I believe this is, we get, you need to have the evaluation available there at the event if possible. Whether it be, if you can do electronic, if you can do an online survey where you have your, where they can go online on their phones and do an evaluation, or if they, if paper and pencil, or iPads or whatever you want to do. But it is better if you're looking at reaction to get their immediate reaction. You're going to get more honest responses that way. And sometimes, sometimes it is good if you want to give people a couple days to think about the event, then you could do delayed reactions where you send a survey out afterwards. I will tell you that you do not get a very good response. You don't get a good response rate when you send it out after the event for people to fill out. Determine what your acceptable standards are. That's just knowing, what is it that, what are those standards? what is it that you want to know? And then measure future reactions against that standard. So again, you know, you want to look at what do you want to know, and did we find out what we wanted to know? So any questions on level 1? This is probably going to be 95% of the surveys that you do are going to, or evaluations that you do are going to be a level 1 evaluation, which is fine. You know, we can still show impact from those. But it is important, even though, you know, even though you're not an evaluation specialist or anything, it is really important that we do evaluate our local programs, you know, evaluate our local, you know, if you're doing an event or activity. So, okay, no questions on level 1? Okay, level 2 is our learning level. So what did the participants learn in the program? So you're looking really to the extent which a participant changes their attitudes or changes their knowledge, increase their knowledge and or increase their skills. So you're trying to find what exactly did the participant learn or not learn. This can be, again, done through a pre-test or a post-test. In my previous position, I would do a pre-test for the shooting sports, before shooting sports training. They would have to do, for the risk management and youth development component, they had to do a pre-test before they came, and then they had to do a post-test at the end. And so I could, you know, again, as I said, the pre-post test really is tough to do. I don't know, I would, you know, I think back now and I would do it as a pre-post reflective. So how much did you know before you came? How much do you know now? It does, at this level, it does require you to really think about your learning objectives and how you want to evaluate it. Again, the 4-H Day at the legislature, you know, one of the things we wanted to know was what did they remember from the pre-conference sessions? Did they remember who their state senator was, or how to find who their state senator was or their state assemblyman? Did they learn how to follow a bill? You know, those types of things, because that's going to, not only does that help us look at how we plan those events, you know, plan those programs in the future, but it also, you know, gives us a knowledge understanding. Learning measures should be objective and quantifiable. Again, those can be done through a paper and pencil. It can be done, you know, you could have a skills, you know, a list of skills that, you know, this would be for, you know, like if you're doing a gardening, you want them to learn how to, you know, how to till up dirt. You want to learn, they want to learn how to plant seeds, and they want, you know, you want them to learn how to water plants. So you have a skills list, and you could, you know, as the you know, as a person, you know, the instructor, you could check off when you see that they have performed those skills. You could also be done through a simulation, through role plays, through case studies. You know, I know sometimes you guys see us give you a simulation, or maybe, you know, hey, we're going to do a role play. Let's see how you react to that. So some examples. So you could do a written exam based on desired learning objectives. You know, you could use that exam as a pretest. You could provide the participants with a worksheet or activity sheet that allows them to track it during their session. You could emphasize and repeat key learning points through the session, and that's always important. And then you use that same pretest as a post-test, and you can look at those, what was your pretest, post-test gain on the exam. So again, that's one example. So what makes that good test? You know, only your valid test questions emerge from the objectives. If you are teaching gardening and all of a sudden you throw in a question about, you know, shooting sports, it's not going to be a valid test question because you're not teaching it during that lesson. So again, that's why it's important to think about your thinking about your objectives. One of the sessions that I teach during this orientation, and I don't remember which one it is, but I teach about, or one of the sessions is on learning objectives. How do you put together a lesson plan, and how do you create learning objectives and outcomes? And so, you know, hopefully that will help you in this aspect. Again, consider writing main objectives and supporting objectives. Test questions usually test supporting objectives, and then you really should ask more than one question for each objective. You know, when you look at, and I'm not going to go into the whole statistics of validity versus, you know, validity and reliability, etc. But you really should have more than one question that kind of gets at the same, at what you want to learn. So some strategies: you can consider using scenarios, case studies, sample project evaluations rather than test questions. So developing a rubric of desired responses. If you're familiar with creating rubrics, you know, that would be, so an example of a rubric would be public speaking, the public speaking score sheet. That's a rubric. So you want to score them on their eye contact with the audience. You know, 1 to 2 is this, 3 to 6 is this, and, you know, 7 to 10 is this. So you would actually create that rubric. You could also provide instructor feedback during the learning activities. So this is where your instructor is monitoring that discussion, the practice activities, the engagement, and you provide that feedback at that moment. One of the things, so when I go and teach the Real Colors Personality Inventory, one of the activities in that is you get together in your dominant personality color and you talk about your wants, needs, desires, and joys, or whatever. I can't remember exactly, but what I always do is I walk around and I'm always listening to those conversations, and I, you know, once in a while we have a group getting off track, not really, you know, understanding, and so I'll jump in and start asking them a few questions and get them to come back in and get to my objectives. So that's one way. You know, you can ask them open-ended questions during the activities to test their understanding. You know, there's a few things, you know, in that you can do. So an example, so which of the following would be considered when evaluating at a reaction level or a level 1? Would you evaluate only the lesson content? Would you obtain both subjective and objective responses? So that would be open-ended and specific questions. Did you get 100% response from participants? Did you get honest responses are important, and only the course instructor should view the results? You know, in that case, you know, this would be a question that you would ask. Mark all that are possible. And so, you know, in this case, we know that we're not evaluating only the lesson content. We're evaluating the process of the lesson as well. But we do want to obtain subjective and objective responses. We do want to get 100% response from participants. We do want honest responses. They are important, but no, the course instructor should not be the only one to review those results. Or the person that taught, you know, it should be the whole planning committee or whatever. So here's another example of a question that you could ask. Match the following to the choices below. So is A reaction or a learning level? Is that a level 1 or a level 2? So changes in performance at work. Is B a reaction or a learning? So you can see, you know, all of these things. So you should have them match those. Another scenario. So an instructor would like to know the effectiveness of the course design and how much the participant has learned in a seminar. The instructor would like to achieve at least a level 2 evaluation. So you would give them that question and you say, what techniques could the instructor use to achieve a level 2 evaluation? So then as a group, then they would come up, or as, in small groups, they would come up with that answer. Or should the instructor also consider doing a level 1 evaluation, and then why or why not? So have them discuss that. That's an example of a scenario that you could use. And then what you would want to do for that is you would create a rubric. So you're going to have these things, and you're going to be listening for these, did they demonstrate an accurate understanding of what a level 2 is? Did they provide at least 2 specific examples of what they could use? Did they demonstrate an accurate understanding of a level 1 evaluation? And did they provide at least 3 examples? Okay, any questions on a level 2? I'm not seeing, and I'm going to share a couple of examples of some, of some surveys that I've had for years that I use, that will show you kind of some examples of questions in this area. Okay, I've got just a few more minutes, so I'm just going to talk about level 3 quickly. So level 3 is really a behavior level. So this is, how did the training affect their performance? To which extent, to the extent to which the behavior change occurred, was the learning transferred from the classroom to the real world, and essentially, was it transferred? So in order for this to happen, for a behavior change to happen, there must be a desire for that change. They know what they need to do and how to do it. There needs to be the right climate at their workplace, and then be rewarded for that change. So, you need to make sure all of those are in place. So the types of climates that would probably prohibit some of these is preventing, they're forbidden for the use of the learning that they took. They're discouraged, changes in the ways things are currently happening. They don't want to make change in what's currently happening. Sometimes the learning is ignored, or it could be encouraging that they're receptive to applying new learning, and then required. Sometimes you are required to change your behavior. So some guidelines, measuring it on a before and after basis, allowing time for that behavior change. It's probably not going to happen in a week. It's probably not going to happen. I think it says it takes 7 days or 7 times for someone to change a habit or whatever. So it's kind of the same thing, but it really takes, it may take a few months. And surveying or interviewing one or more of those who are in the best position to see that change. So it might be the person that the learner, might be their supervisor, it might be their subordinates or their peers, or others that are familiar with that action, that participant's actions. Getting it's good to get, is it good to get 100% response or a sample? It really depends on the size of the group, but the more you can get, the better. You need to repeat it at appropriate times. Typically, if we're trying to show a behavior change, we will follow up at a 3, a 6, a 9, and a 12-month increments. So, looking at that, if at all possible, use a control group. So that's a group, that doesn't have the training, but you tell them about it. And then also the cost versus benefits. So an example of a level 3 might be an observation. If you're teaching them a certain technique, then you as the instructor may follow up with them and observe them in their, in that environment, whether it's a club meeting or, whatever, but you go and observe and see if they have made that change. Could also be a survey or an interview with the participants or with others. Could be performance benchmarks. You really think about our own performance evaluations. it's kind of getting almost, hey, here's what we want to do. We have to make behavior changes in order for that to happen. Or it might be an evidence or a portfolio. So again, an example, this would be a patterned interview or maybe a survey. So you explain the purpose of it, you review the program objectives, and then you ask them to what extent performance was improved because of this, and then follow-up questions. And then also, if you have an evidence or a portfolio, you can see this example. Have them share examples of level, what's a level 3 evaluation that you've created, or what's a level 2 evaluation that you have created, share that, etc. A class I took last summer, just to give an example of this, a class I took last summer through the university, it was on management techniques, or exactly, but we had to, so we finished, we had, I think, 6 or 8 weeks of classes once a week. And then at the end, we had about a 3-week period where we were to be working on a project. And then we came back as a group and presented our project, our project results. And that was, again, it was a way for them to show that behavior change. I took one of the skills that I learned in this class, and I then put it into practice, and here's what happened. So it was good. It was, it was a great way to see that. Okay, level 4. Again, this is one, very rarely do we use this in extension at all, but impact of the education or the training on the organization or the community, final results that occurred, and then the return on investment. So, oops. Oh, I went the wrong way. Sorry, guys. So, how did the training save us costs? This is where, now I will say, on the ag production side, a lot of times they do some of these things because, they teach a new practice for irrigation. They're going to then show, hey, these 5 people that attended my workshop on new irrigation techniques are now using, 10 gallons less a year of water, etc. So you can see these examples. And then some guidelines, you want to measure before and after. If you can use a control group, again, control groups pretty much in our world are non-existent. Oh, and I guess that's the end of that one. So I'm going to share with you in the few minutes that I have left a couple of evaluation forms that I have used in the past. And I know, I can also share like our evaluation tool that we used for the 4-H day at the legislature, which I think was very, very good, and it got at that level 1 and level 2. And then we're looking at trying to figure out a level 3 tool. But this is one I've used for years. You can see it still has my Idaho logos just because this is the one I pulled. But why did you take part in the session? So that's trying to get at why were people there? What did you hope to learn? So what I look for in that question is, are my objectives meeting what our program participant objectives are? And I may have to adjust my program, my learning objectives based on what I know. If I'm getting a theme of what, they all want to learn about this one thing, but I'm not teaching that one thing, then I need to probably be teaching it if it is related to this topic. What did you appreciate what did you most appreciate? How could it better have met their expectations? And then again, looking at, how satisfied were you with the session? One thing that I do with this evaluation, again, it's a real colors personality program that I do. I have them write down their scores for their spectrum of their personality type, because I want to also look for, are certain personality types answering similar. So then I know, if I go into a group and I've got a large majority that are the green personality type, I can kind of tell that, because I've been doing it for so long. When I go in, I can kind of tell what my audience is. I may have to switch gears a little bit in my instructional methods. So, and then here's where I get to that level 2 evaluation. So looking at, did their knowledge improve? And tell me how it did. Did your skills improve in this area? And tell me how it did. Did your awareness improve in this topic area? And explain that. And then we had to do an evaluation tool for the university. That was a required piece. So this is just one example, and I honestly, I use this tool. For those of you, probably Sandy and Sharon, you guys have seen this one in a couple of the programs that I've done. I don't typically, sounds horrible, but I don't typically evaluate programs anymore, unless it's a youth program, but because I've learned over the years how to gauge things like that. That topic we got to totally do differently next time. But again, this is a good tool, and I think I share this. So if you guys, if you're looking for a simple tool to use when you're doing programs, feel free to borrow this one. I borrowed it from somebody else over the years. So, and then I also have, so that's a long evaluation. If they have time to fill that out, then have them fill that out. I also have a shortened version of that, of a similar tool. This was one that I used for statewide training, in my previous position. So what part did you appreciate the most? How could it better have met your expectations? How satisfied were you with this? And then I go into the knowledge, skills, and awareness questions. 4 questions. Gives me the information that I need, but but it's short. So again, those are just examples. If you like I said, if you have a program that you want to evaluate, please, get a hold of myself, get a hold of Brian. We will work with you on getting getting something put together for your, for a program. I would rather have us work with you in the beginning than come back to us and say, hey, we just did this program. Can you help me put together the evaluation tool for it? I'd rather do it in the beginning. And that's, that's part of what we're here for. I actually, it's not my favorite thing to do, but I do like doing evaluation, and I know Brian loves to do evaluation stuff. So, again, it is really important anymore that we do share, that we do evaluate our programs, and that we do show our impact, not only for the state legislature, but you need to be showing your county commissioners. You need to be showing your, potential donors, those types of things, the impact that you're making in your local community. So, any questions? I've got 3 o'clock on the dot. So, but I can answer any questions that you guys might have. Or just call and ask.